All right. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Before we start, Father, would you like to open us up with a prayer?
Well, thank you for coming. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty and eternal God, in Christ your Son, you have shown your glory to the world. Guide the work of our parish, St. Mary of the Hill. Help it to proclaim your holy name. Help us to persevere in faith and to bring your salvation to people everywhere. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you for coming. There's some refreshments back there if you want to help yourself. We're just getting started. All right, so a very short agenda. We have about 6 slides to go through, and you can see up there what we'll be talking about. And then we'll show the renderings and then talk about some cost estimates and finally some fundraising and some timelines to go along with that. So let's start with some introductions. My name is Dick Clement. I've been with the parish for about 29 years, and I'm the project manager for this effort. On the far left is our fearless leader, Father Jude. Bob Goodpastor is with us. He's in charge of fundraising for this effort. Lori Hilger. Lori Hilger is back by the wine. She's our trustee treasurer. Bob Craigle over here manning the slides for us. Bob is on the finance council with pretty much everybody else on this slide except for Wendy. Bob also has a lot of experience in construction. Wendy Newberg is not able to be with us today. She chose to go to Florida instead. And then Art Noy, many of you know Art Noy. He's our trustee secretary. He's also on the finance council. So starting off with the history of our journey. So St. Mary of the Hill has a dual purpose worship and fellowship space. And Archbishop Listecki said that we had to have a dedicated worship space. So we were given the option of moving to St. Therese Parish, which is down on K and Q, and our parish overwhelmingly rejected the idea. So in late 2018, work began to kind of problem solve for this effort. Along came COVID and put that on pause. Once we started coming out of COVID, the Archdiocese announced a capital campaign. With the capital campaign, we were not allowed to fundraise for a dedicated worship space. So Father, in his wisdom, went and said, there's 4 waves to the capital campaign, and he petitioned the Archdiocese to say, let us be in wave number 1. Being in wave number 1, that was a Love One Another campaign, which all of you probably have heard about, right, and donated to probably. With that, we were able to finish the Love One Another campaign as some of the initial churches that went through it, or initial parishes that went through it, put that behind us, and then with that, we're able to now fundraise for the dedicated worship space, and that's where we're at today. So what's been completed to date? We've engaged with an architect to put together, it's called perspective design. And perspective design has a lot of experience with churches and church design. And also a builder, Michael Moore, who many know, he's a prominent builder around here, to provide us realistic design alternatives. This is by no means a final set of drawings for what this dedicated worship space may look like. But what we needed to do is we needed to get the ideas out of our head and on paper, and then start putting some costs with that, so we would have an idea of what this would cost, so that we can start fundraising towards the dedicated worship space. We have a very close partnership with the Carmelites up at Holy Hill, and so we wanted to make sure that they were on board, and we have approval with the from the Carmelites to go ahead with our new worship space. We completed the Love One Another campaign. We did extremely well with the Love One Another campaign. Thanks to all of your generosity, we reached 167% of our goal. So with the Love One Another campaign, we raised, I'm just going to talk in rough dollars here, but we raised about $700,000 for the Archdiocese. Of that, $500,000 comes back to us. So the Archdiocese is only keeping $200,000 of it. $500,000 through those pledges is coming back to us. So that's a good start towards our fundraising for the dedicated worship space. We also have to be working hand in hand with the senior leaders of the Archdiocese, and so we've been meeting with them, and they've been very supportive of our efforts. And finally, we don't want to put our eggs all in one basket with a single builder, and so we've engaged with an additional builder to get some other cost estimates. And also, there's some people with building expertise within our congregation who've offered to be on our building team to offer us free consultation. So with any project, you have to have project guiding principles. And what that is, it holds us, the people that are doing, the committee for this, it holds us accountable. So the very first one is we want to be transparent. We want to be transparent on what we're doing to the parish, to the Archdiocese, and also the Carmelites. As a parish, we're very fiscally conservative. So we only want to build what we can afford. We don't want to end up at the end of this with a bunch of debt and a large mortgage. So to that end, we're going to align our approach to fundraising milestones. So as we raise X number of dollars, that will then trigger a go to being able to do the next step of our project. As we go along, we're going to refine our estimates to make sure that there's going to be no unexpected costs, or at least minimizing those. And finally, we're a humble parish. We do not want to compete with Holy Hill Shrine, and the Carmelites are happy with that as well. So first of all, an aerial view. So this is an aerial view of what the parish center will look like. This parish center will remain virtually the same. Over where these two windows are back here, we're going to create a large opening there, and will connect the new worship space to this space. This space in here will turn into a fellowship hall, and then the new worship space will go out that way. Coming up from 167 or Holy Hill Road, this will be the view coming up from Holy Hill Road. We've opted to keep all of the same type of exterior building materials the same, so that the building does not look like an addition, and want to make it look like it's always been here. So same type of roof structure. We don't want the roof to be pronounced or much higher than the roof of this structure, all to make it all tie together. And you'll see from the outside, we do have some stained glass windows in there, but aside from that and the crucifix adorning the end, we're not trying to make it too glitzy. A front end view of the worship space will show you the narthex. So that area right there is how we're going to connect this structure to that structure. That's going to be roughly about 16 feet long. And the reason for that, there's some various fire codes that we have to go through to make sure that that building is separated from this building. And finally, the interior design. The interior design, this is just a what if, what could it look like? We put some time and effort into making these pictures, but we haven't picked out what the light fixtures are going to look like. We haven't picked out the pews, et cetera. So this is a potential what it could look like. Our initial estimates show that we're going to be using all of the things that you see up here as our altar, as our ambo, et cetera, because we want to make sure that we're trying to keep the price with something that we can afford. Cost estimates. So building the dedicated worship space alone with just footings underneath it will cost about $2.4 million. And that includes that narthex to go out that way. To add an unfinished lower level will be an additional $650,000. Now, a lot of questions have come up after the presentations that have said, you got to be kidding me. If you're putting in a few footings to put the dedicated worship space on, just to go a little bit deeper and putting more concrete down there, that's not going to be $650,000. What adds to that cost is when you're adding that square footage, we have to do various things. So one is code now says that you have to have a sprinkler for something that's going to have that many people. If we have just a dedicated worship space, we're going to have roughly about 300 seats in there. Right about there is where the codes are, where you have to sprinkle or non-sprinkle. You can hold me. Shaking your head, yes? Okay. We have the fire chief here. Yes, yes. So we would have to sprinkle that. We're on a well here, so sprinkling it means putting large tanks of water on site. We also have to, for ADA perspectives, we have to have an elevator shaft. And then finally, the lower level, we would want to connect to the lower level of this building. The lower level of this building right here that we're standing in starts right where Art is sitting on this side. So that's why we had the building positioned over here, and then there would be an underground passage, if you will, that would connect that to our classroom space down here. All of that adds up to $650,000. Finally, we want to upgrade our kitchen facilities. I would call that a nice to have, but it's something that as we change this more into a fellowship hall, it would be nice to have upgraded kitchen facilities. What that looks like, and you'll be able to see it on some of these plans over here, is taking the existing kitchen facilities, bumping them out a little bit past that doorway over there, and then adding a servery where people can come and actually gather food and things like that. I can tell you that afterwards because I don't know exactly the kitchen. And then to finish the interior, right now, as I said earlier, we did not cost out adding a brand new altar and things. Our idea is to try to take the things that we currently have and reuse them over there. And then as the money comes in, we'll what we call adorn the worship space. And so that is kind of an unknown cost because it kind of decides on what we want to do. So the cost of the project is $3.2 million with a little plus sign. I'm going to talk about a rough project timeline, and I'll turn it over to Bob Goodpaster for a few thoughts on fundraising timeline. So our first decision point, where I talked about those milestones, our first decision point is at the end of September. At the end of September, we need some money raised so that we can go to the Archdiocese and say, this is our plan. At that point, we have to have 50% of the project basically in cash in hand so that we're able to put the basement in. If we don't have that much, then we have to make a decision. Do we build without the lower level or without the basement? Starting in October, we're going to re-engage with the architect because we will know by then if we're going to put in a basement or not. The architect then will walk us through putting together final plans, going through site surveys, working with the town, working with the state. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and that will take place all the way through August of 2024. In August of 2024, we want to have ceremonial groundbreaking. In September 21st, we have the Arts and Crafts Fair. And what we want to do is make sure that we don't upset that because that's a huge fundraiser for the Carmelites. So that's on September 21st. September 24th, we want to have all the heavy machinery roll in and start groundbreaking and start building the church. Finally, our goal is to have our very first worship service in our new worship space on Christmas Eve, 2025. So after Bob speaks, I invite Bob Goodpastor, that is his name, Goodpastor, but I'm going to invite him up to talk about the fundraising timeline, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, good afternoon. My area code for my phone is 717. Remember that. Everybody, no one ever answers it because they think it's a car warranty salesman. Okay? But it's a Pennsylvania area code. So if I call you, try to at least listen to the voicemail I leave. Okay? But I'm going to cover three things today. The task that we have financially to raise, and then our approach to it, which is a little bit non-conventional. Hopefully you'll like it. And then I'd like to end with some principles, just like we have principles as a broader building committee. We felt it was important to establish some principles in the way we raise money, especially for how special this parish is, okay? So let me cover what the task is. And I'll try to stand over here so you can see easier. So, can you hear me okay without the microphone? I'll try to talk loud. Okay. Well, look over my shoulder then if you can. All right. It's okay. We're going to be fundraising for a long time. I mean, let's just face it. If you think about and I'll show you in a second, people still have pledges to pay off with the LOA, and we need you to pay those off. Those are important. That's in our fundraising. We're counting on those being paid. We need to get to certain milestones to get, I'll call it the shell, the inside sort of finished. Oh, that's fine, Father. Okay. I haven't had one of these since I was getting paid to work 6 years ago. Okay. That's great. Thank you, Father. Then, we kind of we have our waves 1 and 2 to get that 3.2 million raised. And then there's going to be some money needed, I'm sure, for the inside and things like that. So it's, and the basement is a big decision because you can really make an argument that you don't really have to have it. It's not critically necessary, but if you look at how the parish is growing and the amount of young families joining, and we're going to need extra classroom space. I mean, we can keep gravel down in the basement until we can afford to finish that off, so you can kind of see that the money thing is, it's always going to be there. And it's there for all parishes, but we're not going to let that own us. And then when we get to the principles, I think you'll see that. We're going to just do the best we can as we go. And so one of my tasks is to give us confidence, and you should have confidence that I really believe we're going to make this, but also it's not going to be easy. So it's not in the bag. It is far from in the bag, but I believe if we all get involved, we can make this. So the first is this fall. You're going to see in a second, we're using 3.2 million as our estimate. Dick said we really need to have half of that in cash in hand. We've got about 650 of that already cash in hand between what the parish has saved starting from whenever due to really good fiscal management of the parish and what we've been paid so far from the Love One Another campaign. And I'm going to take you through the building blocks of how I think we can get there. But we still have to try to raise another 950 cash in hand by the fall if we can. And then if we got that far, and then we had a plan on how to raise the other 1.6, which we would have kind of a year and a half to do, 2 years to do. That's how we can make it. So it's not like we need 3.2 million tomorrow, but we still got a pretty big task ahead of us here, okay? Because if you think about it, the LOA campaign, the parish pledged $700,000, which was huge. And, our watermarks are much higher than that. So something to think about it. And then but if we get to that point of the cash in hand, then we'll start to get kind of the pledging set up for the next, several years. And then wave 3 can start, once the building is up. We've been told by the people that helped with the fundraising for that back addition, we weren't here, we've only been here 2.5 years, that, once you have your shell up, getting somebody to donate for pews, it's like, okay, I want to buy 2 pews, in honor of my parents, or this kind of thing. That kind of money can trickle in pretty nicely, but it's just like our job right now is to get that structure going. Okay. We're really going to need to get everybody involved in the fundraising effort, and what I mean by that is it's not atypical for a parish where you have 35% of the people kind of carrying the load for the whole parish. I think that's true with envelopes and things like that. So we really have to find a way to try to certainly depend on the 35% who are always usually the most generous and come through. But we're going to really need to try to tap into that other 60% if we can. And that can be in the form of, there's a lot of ways to help with fundraising. Cash donations, of course, cash is king. It's the most needed, but it's certainly not the only way. And if anybody is near retirement, like I am, or our age, there's some really cool things, you probably already know about, but you can do with your required distributions, or if you have stocks, even though the stock market's been kind of down the last couple of years, if you've been in it a long time, you'll probably still have positive capital gains even in today's market, and you can avoid tax on all of that. There's a lot of things you can do there. But there's also other things people can do. They can help with fundraisers, volunteering in fundraising events. That's going to be huge. Pledging is going to be important. So if somebody's not in a position to give, just knowing that we can include that as a reliable pledge that's coming, that'll help us a lot with the fundraising. You're going to see some people stepping up and leading some great fundraising events. We have a real opportunity with our 100th anniversary. You'll hear about some things, I think, at the end of this month. I think Wendy's planning on talking to the parish about some really exciting things going on there. So and reaching out to businesses, we're going to try to do that. And then we're also trying to reach out, and if you know of anybody, and you can confidentially come up to me after this presentation, we're looking for, a handful of people that can be real game-changing givers. Do you know what I mean? Every gift, a dollar gift, is so much appreciated. But if we could find 5 to 10 to 15 people out there who maybe can really stretch and give us something, super, super, super generous, that could really help us go a long way towards raising that $3.2 million. So we're trying all kinds of different approaches, and there's lots of ways to help out. Okay? We are approaching fundraising a little unconventionally. So first of all, we're not hiring a professional fundraiser. Trust me, there's not a professional fundraiser leading this right now. But it'll save $200,000 to $300,000 by not hiring a professional fundraiser. They usually take 5 to 10%. So let's put that money into it. So with that, the printed materials aren't going to be as nice. The heckling won't be as often. Those are the things you kind of get with a professional fundraiser sometimes. We're going to temper our building plans, like Dick said, to what we can afford as a parish. So as much as you could argue and want and say, I really want a basement, if we're sitting here in the fall, coming up quite short, then we're not going to do a basement. I mean, it's not worth it. It's not worth, and then when the time comes where you need that basement space 5 years from now or whatever, then some other fundraiser can talk about the wing going out the other side. Do you know what I mean? But for now, we're going to just build to what we can afford, because being under financial pressure as a parish, and especially this parish, because this is such a special parish, and the people here are so special and conservative and financially responsible. You can just see it. And it's like, we don't want to disrupt that or ruin that. It's not worth it. No money in the world is worth that. Too many parishes have gone down the tubes because of that. We're not going to let that happen here. So we'll figure it out. And then if we have to do a plan B or a plan C, we have a super talented group on the building committee. We'll figure it out. but let's hope we can do it. I mean, because it really is, I think everybody would agree it's the right thing to do. It's just a matter of, can we get there, okay? The last thing I wanted to kind of say is, so you got about $650,000 in cash available on hand now. It's about another $400,000 coming from the LOA campaign. So if everybody, you got to finish those pledges, pay those pledges off. We'll get $400,000 of the remaining that is coming from LOA. So that takes us to about $1 million already. That would be, we're going to be doing a lot more fundraisers, trying to bring in some outside money. So, you know, or at least make it fun if it's inside money. And I think there's some really great ideas for fundraisers, and there's a lot of energy for people to do that. And that can be some fancy banquet. We'll have some of those, and it can be bake sales, and Knights of Columbus brought cooking. All of that is critical. So we're going to try to raise a few $100,000 that way over the next few years. We will probably try to do a pledge drive within the parish, and we'll just do the best we can to reach everybody and give everybody kind of what they can give from their heart. We're not giving any quotas or anything like that. It's kind of give from your heart. We're still working on, you know, Father and I are knocking on doors, trying to talk people to see if we can get some large donations, some game changer donations if we can. And we're having some okay luck with that. We haven't really got it going hard. It's a lot harder than it first sounded it was going to be. I was like, oh yeah, we'll call these 15 people and, you know, it doesn't quite work like that. But we got to build some relationships and see if we can get some wealthy Catholics to maybe try to help us out. I mean, that's really what it amounts to. And then there'll be like a small mortgage that we can put on at the end if we need to, but the word is small, maybe a couple 100,000, 300, something like that. Nothing, a lot of people, when they build, they'll mortgage half the cost of the project. That would just not be good for us, okay? So I'm going to end with what our fundraising principles are. So we need to be spiritually and faith-based, okay? We can't lose our way, and we won't lose our way over money. Not worth it. Better to have far less dedicated worship space than to be hounding people for money and having everybody in turmoil, always talking about the money and all that. Yes, we're going to be pushing. We have to, because we still need the money, but we're not going to do it at the cost of our spirit. And we have to, you know, really trust that it's God's going to help us here and guide us. Second, we're going to emphasize that giving is a privilege, and it really is. Think about it. I never thought I'd be able to be involved before I die in helping build a church. I mean, God, what a wonderful way to go out of this world. Do you know what I mean? Is to be doing something like that. And we're going to really emphasize for people to give from your heart. The need is great, but you have to decide what works for you. Third, all-inclusive. We already talked about that. Let's strive to, and I'm looking at you because I know you're going to be all involved, but you probably know 2 or 3 people that maybe we can edge them along and get them involved. And by the way, it's a gift to get involved. Once somebody, you know, when we first moved here, we had people coming and asking us to do this and that, and it was a blessing because that's how we got to know people, and you just get hooked on it. So that's what we got to, you know, it's a gift. By getting somebody involved, we're actually doing them a favor, even though they might not think that at the moment. Graciousness, a dollar gift will always be very appreciated. There's nothing, as long as it's given from the heart, that's what makes the difference, okay? And then last, we're going to be versatile and creative, okay? So, you know, cash donations, critical. There's creative ways to give cash, pledging future donations, supporting, volunteering. We're going to try to write a contract, I think, with the contractors so that if we get a parishioner that owns a business that can donate some concrete or, you know, whatever it is. I mean, it's got to be all professionally done, of course, but then they would take that off the cost of the building. That's as good as a donation right there if you can reduce the cost of the building, you know, things like that. And then the last thing I know everybody can do, it's probably the most important thing, is prayer support. Got to pray for this to be successful, and we will be. So that's it. Dick, give it back to you.
We'll open it up for questions. Field from questions from all of you, but then the whole building team will be up here. We'll flip these all around so you can take a look at all the renderings that were just up on the board. We also have over here a floor plan, so you can take a closer look at what the floor plan may look like. It'll show the Adoration Chapel, etc. That's all being planned. One of the questions that has come up now the last 2 times is, how big is this worship space? This worship space right here is 2,900 square feet. The new worship space is roughly going to be about 4,700 square feet times 2. So if we put the basement in, the unfinished basement, that will be basically a copy of what's above. So it'll be 4,700 up top, 4,700 down below. Well, that's one of the questions that has come up consistently. But what other questions might you have? Yes. It will seat approximately 300, including the people at the altar. Yes. So the question was, what is the increase of parishioners coming and going? So we've been growing, I would say the last 2 or 3 years, we've been growing quicker than what we have in the past. So right now we're at about 480 families. Is that right, Father? Yeah, and we've been adding more than we've been letting go. And I would say that's probably around 15 families a year. And I would say that 1/3 of the people worship strictly down here, 1/3 of the people worship strictly up on top, and 1/3 of the people are in either one. But people that worship only on top, they put their envelope in the basket, it still comes down here. What other questions? Yes? How much will this increase our taxes? I would say to Lori, that's 0, right? Yeah, so the answer to that for the recording is that our taxes are 0, so our taxes will go up 0. But there's a cost of running a larger facility, so we'd have to incur those costs in addition to, maintenance, et cetera. Yes. See, I've been trying to, yes. Okay. His question was taxes. Taxes, and how much would taxes go up? And taxes would not go up because we don't pay tax. Yes, yes, sir. Yes. Bob reminded me that the Archdiocese imposes, and this is what they do this to every parish. There is basically an assessment that we pay annually. And Lori Hilger, our trustee, did a lot of work with the Archdiocese and basically got our fundraising monies to be considered outside of that assessment. So we will not pay the Archdiocese assessment on the money that we're collecting for the building project, which is a big win because that saves us roughly $200,000 to $300,000. There's other small things that have been done. So for instance, if you take a look at these renderings back here, to have those professionally done, they were about $800 a piece to have those professionally done. Bob Craigle, I won't say where he works because he did this after hours, but he did it at his employer, and he created these for free for us. It saved us $3,200. So little things like that, that all adds up. Yes, question? Okay.
The new churches that they have this huge baptismal bath where an adult could go in. Are we required to have that, or should we keep our traditional baptismal?
So the question is, are we required to have a submersible, if you will, baptismal font, or can we keep what we have? So the short answer on that is our intent is to keep our existing baptismal font. The location of it might change because the Archdiocese likes to have that in the entrance to the church, like this one is in the entrance to our church. So that would be in the entrance to the new worship space. And then people would likely walk around it. But our intent is not to have a submersible one. We do have to work with a liturgical consultant from the Archdiocese once we get to 50% of our fundraising. And then they will start informing us of any things that they would require from an Archdiocese perspective. But right now, we haven't heard anything from them on that. Father?
I was just going to say, we go to the Basilica for the Easter Vigil, and that's where baptisms are performed for adults. So I don't see a need to have a full immersion baptismal font in our worship space. And national shrines, by the way, are not allowed to have weddings. The only reason Holy Hill is allowed to have weddings is because we have a parish here. And so if the Carmelites want to continue to have weddings, I just thought of this the other day, we have to continue having our weddings in the Basilica. And occasionally we go to the Basilica for funerals. Traditionally, we have our funerals in the Chapel of St. Therese. But there are occasions when we do bring in 500, 600, 700 people for a funeral. And so I'd like to continue that. So.
Second question. Yes.
The Archdiocese wants us to put in kneelers. I understand that some people want to kneel. I can't kneel anymore. But some of the new churches aren't even putting in kneelers. Yeah, and we just put a section with kneelers and a section without kneelers. We have to put kneelers in the whole church. I'm trying to think of there's one church in the fans, they don't have kneelers. And that was the newly built church.
We were told by the Archdiocese that kneelers were required. Now, if they change that, we'll find out. Yeah. I mean, right now, we have chairs, folding chairs. We have a few chairs back here that are upholstered chairs with kneelers. That's another option too. So, we could possibly get some old pews from a church that's been closed and temporarily use them until we can find exactly what we want, as we're going to use the existing church furniture until we can afford to upgrade, so to speak. So nothing's been written in stone.
And for the recording, the question is, do we have to have kneelers?
Do we have enough parking?
Question is, do we have enough parking for the addition? Right now, we plan to use our existing parking. There is money that we've had set aside for several years now to redo the parking lot. As Tony back there is shaking his head feverishly, yes. We would like to probably hold on that project until after the construction because the parking lot will get torn up. And then we'll take a look at our parking. But there has been money set aside for that for several years to redo our parking. What other questions? Oh, sorry.
As far as the money collected right now, also working into the money in the bank as far as the return on investment.
So the question, I'll repeat them. So the question is, with all the money that we've collected so far, are we putting that money basically to work for us? And the answer is yes. So Bob Goodpastor is on the Finance Council, and he is in charge of the investments. So our investments are invested in a lot of conservative stocks, in CDs, so all different types of financial instruments to make sure that it's just not sitting around earning 0.00001%.
returns on your investment, if you donated, that it would be used that way, and, you know, it could be a bill.
Okay, so the suggestion, I am repeating them, yes, sir. So the suggestion was that as you start taking a look at your portfolios, there's potentially some investments that you have that have gotten significant capital gains over the years. I myself, I purchased some stocks way back when I was a youngster, and now I'm just a little bit older than a youngster, and they've appreciated greatly. If I cash those in, there's a significant tax hit to myself and my wife from the capital gains. If you do it right and you donate a group of stocks or whatever you have to the church, you can claim that as a donation, but you don't have to pay capital gains on it. And when the church cashes that in, they do not have to pay capital gains on it. So it's a way to give to this campaign using financial means that you currently have, where you can give kind of, if you wish, at a personal discount.
I know that the library in Hartford is built by a construction company, and all stuff is verified with more now than the city of Hartford. One of our churches gave a lot of money to start that with Jack and Jerry Russell. The library was built. And it looked just terrible. They had to hire, I think, it was one year construction. I think it might have been a diamond material job.
Yep.
And Frank Paul probably did that. Now, I'd like to talk to that building manager, and at least might have, will have a lot more information that I have. But I would like to see the contract worded that we don't have to redo anything. The man has experience in building this type of structure. And possibly, if we could spec it out as far as materials, so the contractor specs it out, and possibly have focus on energy to determine energy costs. And if we would have to drill a well, if we do anything different with this building, or put it in the center.
So to summarize the question, it's really more of a suggestion to make sure that we have the proper insurance and guarantees in place as we write a building contract, to make sure that we don't end up with issues like they had with the Jack Russell Library, where they had to hang nets from the ceiling because they had excessive moisture coming down, et cetera. So Bob is not our construction expert. He has experience in construction, so he's helpful on, but we will be working. We have a parish member who is an attorney, and he has donated his services, and he will be informing us as we start writing contracts to make sure that we're protecting our assets here and making sure that we're not going to end up with a bad contract. Yes? So the question is regarding basement, no basement. Do we need to have a basement regarding tornadoes? That's a good question. I don't have the answer to that. That basement over there? Yeah. Yeah.
I think the reason that I know the reason we want a basement is we need more classroom space and we need more office space. All of our religious education classes are doubled up. And we have the music room, for example, doubles as a classroom and also a storeroom. Some of the offices are no more than cubby holes. So we need to expand. And that's the real reason that we would like to have more office space and more classroom space. There are added expenses, as we mentioned, the sprinkler system would have to be added. And we could put in an elevator shaft at this time, with the possibility of putting in the elevator for handicapped accessibility, and expand our parking has already been mentioned. So those are the reasons why we would love to have a basement, but if we can't afford it, we can't afford it.
Yeah, and the basement decision will be made right around end of September. We're going to have a pretty heavy campaign push for donations, and hopefully we can make the money that we need by end of September so that we can make a decision to build with a basement. Yes, I'll start over here and I'll work my way over there. The question is, can we have a partial basement? The answer is yes. It would not save us a lot of money. And the reason why is because our occupancy numbers right now are really pushing the limit on do we have to sprinkle that or not. Anything that we add to a basement, even if it were a partial basement, it might save us a little money in the construction, but your cost of your ADA compliance, which is your elevator, and the cost of sprinkling does not go away. So it would save us a little bit of money, but probably not something that would make us want to consider it. Yes. The question is, with the elevation that we have out here, do we want an exposed basement? And that's actually the plan. We will have it won't be exposed on this side, right? But into the hill, it'll be exposed. It'll be kind of a walkout basement, if you will. So you'd walk into the offices / classrooms down there. Sheila, did you have another question? Sure. So the question was, since this will be a fellowship hall, that we will be expanding the kitchen facilities, and what does that look like? The best thing I can recommend is, I have a picture right up here. I can show it to you. And just real roughly, if you kind of draw a line from where the door is entering into the kitchen, maybe over this way a little bit more, there's a closet back there, if you will, and we'll take it and extend it out from there and probably a little bit past those two stained glass windows over there. And that will be a servery. So it can have a two-sided servery there, and then we will put new kitchen equipment in there, potentially as much as a new one of those industrial range hoods, depending on how much money we have and what we want to put in there. Yes, sir. So the question is, for the money coming back from the Love One Another campaign, is that considered cash in hand? It's only cash in hand if we have hard dollars. So the way it works is that every quarter we get a check from the Archdiocese for our cut of the Love One Another campaign dollars that have come back. So far, we've gotten about $139,000 back. And we're expecting to get roughly $400,000 back yet, but we only get that money as the pledges are paid, and there's 4 more years on those pledges. So if people can expedite how much they're giving in their pledges, we'll get more. But right now, there's really 2 separate containers of money that we have. One is cash on hand, and one is cash that we're expecting. Good questions. What else? Yes. Yes. So the question is, what if we don't raise the money and we're not able to do this? So there's a myriad of different types of responses we can have to that. We could take and just remodel this area to make it a dedicated worship space, but that means we can't have fellowship in here anymore. We could potentially blow out a small little fellowship hall off the side of this. We looked at that early on. From a cost perspective, if we're adding a little bit more money to it, you can add a new worship space to it. So there's different options that we have. We're going with basically what we consider our all-in option, as we've talked about different things with Father and with the Carmelites, etc. What is it that we want to build? And that's what we're fundraising towards. Bless you. What happens to the Love One Another campaign money if the timing doesn't work out, or if the building, the Love One Another campaign dollars, as you go into the Love One Another campaign, you have to tell the Archdiocese what your portion of the Love One Another dollars will be used for. And then that goes to a separate account. I'm not using all the right words, but that's kind of what happens. That money then is just, it's kind of locked down for what we said it would be for. And we said it would be for a dedicated worship space. What that looks like depends on how much money we raise.
We said that we made it kind of broad, right, in the statement. So if that does happen, then we don't use a dedicated worship space or whatever, right? Highly unlikely, right? But if we don't, then we need to grow other buildings. It's restricted in the fact that we can't,
So
Justin's provide my car anyhow, so.
so for the purpose of the recording, Art added that the money is in a restricted account, and it's really for the building and grounds. It was written a little bit looser so that we're not locked down to putting up a new structure with that money. Otherwise, we lose it or something weird like that. I mean, it's our money. We'll never lose it. Yes. Did you have any other questions? Yes. Wave 1 started in February. Yes. Bob, do you want to talk into fathers? So the question is, the slide said that fundraising started in February. It's already April. Are we losing ground? Good question.
We're not losing ground for sure, but the kind of things we're doing is we've brainstormed some individuals we could go talk to, and hoping for, I would call a super large donation, and I don't want to get into how many people or who's given what or anything like that. I can give one, example that we're looking for. Like, one person has sort of said, yeah, I'll give $100,000. Okay. So it's those kinds of things that we've been trying to, we wanted to avoid Lent too much. Do you know what I mean? And Easter, and we're kind of getting rolling. So between now and October, we're hoping that from these meetings, people will probably get a mailing out to everybody with a donation form or whatever, and maybe we'll get some of that money back in cash. People can call Father anytime, and especially if you have a confidential, anything you want to do in that respect. The parish is getting some money in, a little bit of money. We're going to have probably at least one big fundraiser, maybe two between now and October. And we'll get a little bit of more Love One Another campaign, maybe another 30, 40,000 from, depending on how people, right? So it's close. It's close. It's close. But we're doing the best we can, and trying to see where we can shake it up. Hey, one other thing while I got the microphone, I just want to say, since for the recording, is if anybody's thinking about doing like stock donations and all that, make sure you talk to somebody, a financial planner or somebody, because if you don't do it the right way, you don't get those deductions. You don't want to mess yourselves up with that. There's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. Okay, so make sure you do it the way you should do it. Okay.
I just wanted to mention too, we have several fundraisers in the works already. We have the antique flea market on July 29th, and that's been doing better every single year. Thank you, Tony. And then we have and our parishioners, and we have the parish pantry at the annual Arts and Crafts Fair at Holy Hill. And that's bringing in more money than we've ever brought in, again, thanks to our parishioners. So we have those things going for us. We have a dinner auction planned for August the 13th. And so if you haven't heard about that, you certainly will in the days ahead. And that's an exciting thing that we're doing. So there's a lot of little things. We talked about having a bake sale every month. Our youth group sponsored a bake sale, and they did all the baking, and they made $500. So you can imagine if all the families of the parish donated something towards a bake sale, what we could do. Even the brat and the hamburgers that we sold through the Knights of Columbus last summer brought in over $5,000. So every little bit counts. And we really appreciate everything that everybody in the parish does to help finance this new dedicated worship space.
Do you know anybody that you think would be a very generous giver, let's say maybe even outside the parish, like the car dealers really well, and they could donate a car or an oil change even, but a car or something like that, or somebody that you'd say, this would be somebody you ought to talk to, and I'll go with you. I will go any time of day. Fowler's available. We're really looking for those big leads if we can. That's part of it. It's the big leads can't get it done, but I think we need both. I think we got to get everybody in the parish doing it, but we'll go. I'm not proud. I'll beg for money from anybody.
We'll also, for that transparency that we talked about, come around June-ish, we're going to put a thermometer in the hallway so you can kind of see where we're at towards our fundraising goals. So that's kind of a typical fundraising thing. You'll see that. So, all right, do one or two more questions. I can see a few people getting antsy. We're at 2:00, and then we can come on up and ask the questions. I'm here all day. So, yes. Absolutely. So the question is, if you weren't on board with the Archdiocese Love One Another campaign, but you're on board with doing this, you can absolutely, and we would highly encourage it, donate to this campaign. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Is it allowable for the diocese or the church to purchase tax-free municipal bonds that are recallable? In other words, so 10 or 15, I'm not in that business, I know a little bit about it. 10 years or 15 years out, you sell these bonds, you get the cash so that you can continue the project, but then you also can call those bonds back immediately. If somebody comes along and says, hey, you got 100,000 or half a million or whatever, you can call them all back. Is
So-
that feature even available to the diocese or to the church?
So thank you for the question. For the recording, the question is, if we come up short, can we sell some type of tax-free municipal type of bond that are callable? Absolutely be callable. And then as we have the money, we can pay those off early, and that's past my expertise, but not
That
Lori's.
sounds like a loan to me.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
It sounds like a loan to me. We go to the bank and get a loan.
I'm sorry, I can't understand that.
You can say it.
Right? So,
Maybe 2.5. Making it a little different.
no, that's fine. That's fine. So she said that sounds like a loan or a mortgage.
Yeah.
So it's a different way to raise that money.
right.
Yeah,
We can do that
yeah.
Can do that. Well, the way bond situation.
if we choose to.
Yeah.
Typically, bonds aren't exactly desirable, but they are because of this continuous interest rate that they keep doing. That would be a way to keep the project going as long as you have the clause in there that they're recallable immediately. If funds come available, that's the kicker to it.
Yeah, yeah, and there's, yes,
What that essentially means is people that will buy these and all of a sudden they got the investment picking over again, it said maybe 4, 5, 6%. And all of a sudden they get a letter saying, look, we're gonna pay those bonds off in top right now, here's your money. And we no longer have, covered by the, have to take care of the bonds for the interest. That makes it a little more difficult to solve, but it does work.
So just for the sake of the recording, there is an idea to, if we choose to, do we want to issue a municipal bond of some sort? That would be callable.
Does the church and diocese allow that sort of thing? First of all, I don't know.
Yeah. And the question is, does the church allow that? Don't know. I mean, that's part of the financing options that we would have to look at depending on where we end up in our fundraising. Yep. All right. So I'm going to ask Father to say a quick prayer. And then the building team will be up here. Come on up and take a look at the renderings. We'll flip them all over. Love to hear your ideas, suggestions, thoughts, comments, whatever you have, okay? And thank you all for coming.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, we give you thanks, Almighty God, for these and all your blessings that you have poured forth on St. Mary of the Hill Parish. And we ask for every good thing through Christ, our risen Lord. Amen. Our Lady of Good Success, pray for us. Thank you very much.